who was trying to file an insurance claim. So you know he was having a bad day, not because something happened that he had to file a claim, but because he had filing a claim makes it a bad day, right? Just the act of filing an insurance claim is like, oh, come on. You want my firstborn? What do you want? So he's trying to file an insurance claim. Here's what had happened. He'd had a problem with coyotes in and around his ranch. And so he decided, I got to get rid of these coyotes. So what he was doing, he was setting live traps and he was catching them. And then he was, again, so we don't get censored, he was finding a way to dispose of them. Okay? Got it? But he decided he wanted, excuse me, he wanted to try a different method. So he trapped a coyote, and instead of disposing of it in his conventional manner, he tied a stick of dynamite to its neck. Don't even ask me how you do that to a coyote. I don't know. Ties a stick of dynamite to its neck, lights the fuse, and then opens the trap and lets the coyote run. And in a very unobliging manner, the coyote ran right under his pickup truck and stayed there. And now he's filing an insurance claim for a truck that's totaled, and he has to explain why. So I guess maybe one lesson there is don't do this at home or anywhere else. But maybe trying to do that, maybe that guy got what he deserved. You know, maybe he learned a valuable lesson there. But beyond that, that story demonstrates something else, and it's this. When we give in to anger and bitterness, we can end up destroying ourselves. When our kids were little, we had the little books of Mr. Happy and Mr. Sad and, you know, all those. I think this probably qualifies as Mr. Angry, doesn't it? He just looks angry. Let's read a little bit. Fade him down a little. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor, for we're all members of one body. And then he quotes from Psalm, in your anger, do not sin. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, and don't give the devil a foothold. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. From Ephesians chapter 4. In June of 1972, on June 18th, there was a jet that crashed at the airport in London, England, Heathrow Airport. In that crash, 118 people were killed. That's a sad story. That's a horrible thing. But the cause of the wreck just compounds that, makes it even worse. Because here's what happened. The pilot was upset because an airline strike had just been ended. The dispute was solved, and he did not like the concessions that the union had made to the airline. So he's back to work, but he wasn't happy about it. And as he was preparing for takeoff and just taking off, he noticed there was something wrong. The plane wasn't balanced properly. And later on, they discovered the cargo had not been properly loaded. It was causing the plane, they call it trim, if you're in the aviation industry. The balance was not right. And when he realized what was wrong, and he was angry anyway for having to fly, he unintentionally, but very emotionally, overcorrected. And that jammed all the controls, and it crashed into the runway and killed 118 people. So 118 people died because he was mad. So uncontrolled anger can be really dangerous. You ever heard of road rage? Ever seen it from one side or the other? Okay, we won't go any deeper into that. In Los Angeles, they did a study over an extended period of time, and it showed that 80% of morning rush hour accidents were caused by someone who just had an argument with their spouse before they left the house that morning. Anger is the reason. Anger actually can be a really pricey indulgence. It can be very expensive. You know, the Germans lost World War I. You may remember that. A little over 100 years ago. The Germans were angry about having lost World War I. And that anger continued. It actually was a contributing factor in the beginning of World War II, in causing World War II to happen. The Germans were angry about losing World War I, and it just, you know, the domino effect, and it led to World War II, which they also lost, if you know your history. After the Germans lost World War II, a statue was erected on the border between Germany and Poland, because in losing World War II, the Germans lost several cities to Poland. It was part of the, you know, call it plunder, I guess, or whatever. Towns that had belonged to Germany now belonged to Poland after World War II. And this statue was placed on the border, and it was the statue of a woman who was like brooding. She was sad, she was upset, she was, you know, worried about something. And the inscription said, "Never forget, Germans, of what blind hatred has robbed you." And then it listed all the towns that Germany lost to Poland because of their anger. You see how negative emotions like anger can take their toll on all of us? Back in the 1950s, there were some people that were given, it's called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. It was a personality test, just checking, you know, various things, okay? Just kind of one of those things that they do when they get government money and they don't know what to spend it on. So they did this personality test, so to speak, in the 50s. Over 2,000 people were given this test. About 30 years later, some researchers at Duke University decided they wanted to follow up on these 2,000 people that had been given this test. And they divided them, before they located them, they divided them into levels of hostility that they showed. Not hostile, extremely hostile, and where along the way, you know, some were somewhere along the line. And here's what they found. Are you ready for this? The 20% that was tested as most hostile had they were 4 times more likely to be dead 30 years later than the 20% that were the least hostile. Is there a direct correlation? Who knows? That's enough. Those numbers are enough to make you stop and think, aren't they? That maybe anger is really, really expensive. It's at least enough to make you think. And anger, it's hard to measure what all it costs you. You ever heard of the lady that got so mad at a department store that she wrote a letter to the manager? And her letter said, "Your store made me so think I can't even mad right." Yes, it did, didn't it? Yes, it did. There's an old Arabian proverb that says, "Anger is a wind that blows out the lamp of the mind." And we've all seen that, haven't we? When somebody just gets so mad, they're not even thinking straight. So they're so think they can't even mad right. We see that in people. You know who we don't see that in? Rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes. See, a rattlesnake is not immune to rattlesnake venom. A rattlesnake gets bitten by another rattlesnake, he will die. Isn't that interesting? When two rattlesnakes want to fight, here's the problem. We've got a rattlesnake here we'll call John, and a rattlesnake here we'll call, I'm trying to think of a name that's not represented here, George. Okay? We got John and George. Because I don't want to be guilty of calling somebody a rattlesnake. You know what I'm saying? So John is mad at George, and he wants to fight George. But John doesn't want to bite George, because if John bites George, then he's going to feel obligated to eat George after he killed him. And when he eats George, he's ingesting his own venom, and he's going to kill himself also. See, unless if he would give George enough time for his digestive system to process and break down the venom before he went ahead and ate him. And, you know, so rattlesnakes, when they fight, they won't bite each other. Here's how they fight. They'll raise up, kind of like a, what are those, cobras? Yeah. They'll raise up, and they'll start this bobbing and weaving dance, okay? And they'll try to bump each other. The goal is, think WWE here, the goal is pin your opponent on his back for a few seconds. I mean, you can't tap out, you know, and bring in the next snake, okay? You're on your own. But that's the goal. Get one on his back for a few seconds, and then there's a winner and there's a loser. And they both walk away. Well, no, they don't walk away. But they both live. That's how rattlesnakes fight. Isn't that interesting? People, on the other hand, have the emotional capability of murdering each other, don't we? And we have the emotional capability of destroying each other in other ways also, psychologically, or, you know, use whatever term you want to use. We're kind of rare that way. We're capable of killing our own kind. What's the Bible say in our text that we need to be avoiding? Things like bitterness and wrath and anger, evil, malice. You've seen it. An otherwise intelligent, responsible human being can act like an absolute idiot when he gives in to anger. Right? Yeah. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Anger hurts your Christian witness. There's a guy, he was a preacher, and he wrote a book called Come Unto Jesus. And he, you know, he was pleased with his book. I mean, obviously, he'd written what he intended to write, and the finished product, he's like, yep, let's publish this. It got published. And another preacher wrote, this was several decades ago, another preacher wrote a review of his book, and it was published in the paper. It was not a positive review. He criticized a lot of things about the book. Kind of got under the skin of the guy who'd written the book, but he let it go until those opinions that had been expressed in the review started becoming the popular opinion about the book. And the book was not well received, and people weren't buying it, and it was, you know, people were making fun of it. And that was really, really starting to bother the guy who had written the book. So he wrote an angry response to the review of his book, and he was to be published in the same newspaper, so the same people who'd read the bad stuff about his book would see his side of it. He said some things in that letter that he never would have said in other circumstances. Before he mailed the letter, though, he showed it to another preacher friend of his, a guy named Charles Spurgeon. Some of you may have heard of him. In the 1800s, Charles Spurgeon was like the Billy Graham of the day. And some of you don't know what I mean by that. Billy Graham. He asked Spurgeon, he said, you think I ought to mail this letter Spurgeon said, by all means, mail it. But first of all, beneath your signature at the bottom of the letter, write, by the author of Come Unto Jesus. You see the problem? That's kind of a Solomon's wisdom kind of point, isn't it? The letter never got mailed. He couldn't do it and acknowledge what he had initially written about. Sometimes the reasons for our anger are the result of the way we were treated. Young, whatever. And children, they can act out, they can do all kinds of things because they were mistreated in some way by somebody that they trusted, whoever, and they don't know how to react, and so it comes out in anger, right? This happens. At some point, though, folks, your response to your life is ultimately yours. Maybe not in a kid this tall, but at some point, your response is your responsibility. Paul tells us to be imitators of God. How are we all doing on that? Yeah. No, we're not real good at that. Did Jesus ever have a reason to be truly angry at the way he was personally treated? Yep. He sure did. He was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed, all for crimes he had never, ever committed, and everybody knew he'd never committed them. You, on the other hand, how did you react last time you were cut off in traffic? Don't answer out loud, please. There might be a microphone that's able to pick you up, and then it's all over. Okay, don't do that. How about the last time someone spread a rumor about you? True or untrue? Don't even worry about that. Someone spreading a rumor about you. How about the last time someone confronted you with an issue that they had with you, and you didn't appreciate being confronted with it? You starting to figure it out? Maybe your anger is ruling you more than you realized. If that's the case, maybe it's time to take Paul's advice to heart. What we read earlier. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Forgiving each other, just as in Christ, God forgave you. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. Next time you're tempted to get angry, 7 words is all you need to remember. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. We're going to stand and we're going to sing our invitation. The invitation hymn is the opportunity to do something about it. To do something about your relationship with Christ. What's he calling you to do? Maybe he's calling you right now for the first time. You need to accept me. Well, then let's do that. If that's not the call, if the call is, you need to calm it down a little bit. Okay, then do that. Make that decision. Your decision is between you and God. But make the one he wants.